Have you ever stopped to think? What would a battlefield in the 16th century have been like? On one side, Western Europe, with its armies organized in classic pike and rifle formation, an almost deadly formation of lances and shots. On the other side, vast barriers, an unforgiving territory where cavalry dictated the rules. In this scenario, a question arises. How can a nation be successful militarily speaking without adhering to the dominant strategic pattern? The answer, surprising and ingenious, came from the heart of Tsarist Russia, the Guliai-Gorod. Forget the static walls, the permanent fortifications we know. Russia conceived something unprecedented. A defense that moved, that kept pace with its campaigns, that adapted to hostile terrain. Prepare to delve into the history of a singular military invention, a strategy so audacious that it defied the conventions of war and shaped the destiny of an empire. Guliai-Gorod, or literally, the wandering city, was not just a set of defense strategies. It was a philosophy of combat, an intelligent response to the challenges of a constantly changing world. A Russian alternative that, for its originality and effectiveness, deserves to be revealed. But what was the heart of the Russian challenge? Imagine a map of Eastern Europe in the 16th century. At its heart was Tsarist Russia, a vast territory stretching across seemingly endless plains. The steppes, unlike the battlefields of Western Europe, dotted with forests, rivers, and natural fortifications. The Russian steppe was an open, vast, and unprotected canvas. For the armies of the time, accustomed to fighting on more rugged terrain, this lack of barriers posed a crucial tactical problem. And who were the masters of the sea of grass? The fearsome Tartar hordes, fast, relentless warriors on horseback, with military tradition focused on speed and shock. Their primary tactic was a lightning charge of the cavalry, a devastating blow that could dismantle unprepared infantry formations. For Russia, confronting this constant threat required a military approach that took into account the enemy's mobility and lack of natural cover. Meanwhile, in Western Europe, warfare had evolved into the sophisticated and deadly combination of pike and shot. Pikemen, with their long lances, formed a defensive barrier against cavalry charges, while protecting musketeers, who, with their firearms, punished the enemy from a distance. This symbiosis proved effective in many scenarios, but it depended on a certain density of formation and a terrain that, even if it did not offer total cover, at least allowed these units to be organized. For Russia, the pure and simple adoption of pike and shot presented obvious limitations. How could musketeers be protected in an open steppe without the almost impenetrable barrier of firmly positioned pikemen? The vast expanse of the territory made it difficult to maintain long supply lines and coordinate large armies in the Western style. Russia needed something more, a solution that not only neutralized the advantage of the Tatar cavalry, but that was also adaptable to its unique geography. The answer to this dilemma, as we shall see, was as ingenious as it was unexpected. Faced with the dilemma of fighting in vast, open terrain against swift, relentless cavalry, Tsarist Russia devised a truly original military response, the Guliai-Gorod. Far from being a single structure, the term Guliai-Gorod functioned as an umbrella term for a variety of field fortifications that shared one essential characteristic: mobility. The fundamental concept behind this innovation was relatively simple but profoundly effective: to create defensive barriers that could move with the army on the move, providing shelter and constant firepower for armed infantry and artillery, especially against the feared enemy cavalry charges. Under this umbrella, we find solutions that varied in size, complexity, and tactical application, from imposing wooden walls to versatile wagon formations, each designed to meet specific challenges on the battlefield. One of the most impressive manifestations of the Guliai-Gorod concept was the massive wooden structures, veritable walking walls. Imagine sturdy wooden panels, meticulously constructed with strategic openings, so-called loopholes, for the barrels of arquebus and cannons to pass through. These elements were transported on separate carts and, upon reaching the desired location, were quickly joined together by chains to form a continuous, defensible barrier. In some cases, such as the famous defense of Moscow in 1591 against the invasion of the Crimean Tatars, these walls could stretch for miles, transforming the landscape into a makeshift fortress. The genius of this approach lay in its ability to create an almost instantaneous line of defense in an open field, allowing the elite Russian infantry, the Streltsy, with their heavy arquebus and support, to deliver their shots with precision and certainty, turning any enemy charge into a shower of lead. This wooden wandering city not only offered physical protection, but also an important psychological factor, discouraging the frontal attacks of the Tatar cavalry, which was accustomed to facing more flexible formations. The versatility of the Guliai-Gorod was not limited to imposing wooden walls. Another ingenious form of mobile fortification was a wagon-mounted defensive shield. These were smaller structures, usually made of sturdy wooden planks, fixed to wheels or small animal-drawn carts. Each shield could house a small number of soldiers, providing protection for individuals or for small units of infantry and artillery on the move. This configuration allowed for greater tactical flexibility, allowing for gradual advances under cover or for the creation of strongholds at strategic points on the battlefield, as demonstrated at the Battle of Kodinka Field. However, the most common and perhaps most effective form of Guliai-Gorod was a wagon fort, also known as a tabor. This tactic, with roots in successful military examples such as those of the Bohemian Hussites in the 15th century and the Ottomans, involved transforming the Russian army's own supply trains into veritable mobile fortresses. The wagons were arranged in circular or rectangular formations, often chained together to increase stability and prevent breaches. This makeshift barrier provided protection from cavalry attacks, while Russian soldiers positioned in and on the wagons could use their arquebus and small artillery pieces to repel the enemy. The tabor was not only a defensive structure, it was also a mobile fighting platform, allowing the Russian army to move across the vast steppe territory while maintaining constant protection and the ability to inflict damage on the enemy. This strategic approach proved to be instrumental in the numerous Russian campaigns against the nomadic hordes and even in clashes with European armies. If the concept of Guliai-Gorod encompassed various forms of mobile fortifications, the tabor or wagon fort emerged as the backbone of major Russian military campaigns, especially in the vast steppes. Imagine an army on the march not as a vulnerable linear column, but as an organism protected by a mobile defensive perimeter made up of thousands of strategically placed wagons. This was the essence of the Russian tabor, a tactic that transformed the supply train itself, essential for long journeys in inhospitable territory, into a nearly impenetrable barrier. The scale of these formations could be colossal. In campaigns such as Vasily Golitsyn's against the Crimean Tatars in 1687, an army of tens of thousands of men and horses could drag along more than 10,000 wagons, forming a tabor miles long. This formation, though slow, provided constant protection against surprise attacks. At the slightest sign of danger, the march would cease, and the wagons would be quickly drawn up into a circle or square, with the infantry and artillery taking up defensive positions inside. This wooden and wheeled wall proved incredibly effective against the traditional rapid-fire tactics of the nomadic cavalry, breaking up their charges with coordinated volleys of arquebus and cannon. The tabor was not only a shield, it also served as a mobile base of operations, allowing the Russian army to hold out for long periods in hostile territory and launch raids from a position of safety, even against more organized European armies, as demonstrated in some engagements of the Russo-Polish War. The tabor could offer surprising resistance, turning strategic retreats into tenacious defenses, as evidenced by the maneuvers of Vasily Sheremetev. Despite their undeniable effectiveness for a considerable period, the era of the Guliai-Gorod, and in particular the tabor, was not eternal. By the end of the 17th century, a number of factors began to undermine their importance on the battlefield. One of the main catalysts for this decline was the advancement of artillery technology. European foundries began to produce lighter, more accurate, and more powerful field guns. In the face of these new weapons, The wooden defenses that formed the backbone of the Guliai-Gorod offered increasingly limited protection. More powerful cannon shells could easily pierce the wooden walls, making the wandering cities more vulnerable. In addition, the geopolitical landscape of Russia itself was changing. The Tsarist Empire expanded its borders, pushing ever further south toward the Black Sea. This expansion was accompanied by the construction of an extensive network of permanent fortresses and supply depots across the steppes. With these fixed bases in place, the need to transport large quantities of supplies in convoys protected by tabors was significantly reduced. Russian troops could now find shelter and resupply at strategic points, making the transport of heavy wagons less essential. Finally, the evolution of military tactics itself favored more flexible and maneuverable formations over the large and sometimes slow tabor formations. Line infantry, with the development of lighter and more efficient firearms, gained prominence, and the need for large-scale mobile fortifications began to give way to other defensive and offensive approaches. Slowly, Guliai-Gorod, which had for so long been a symbol of Russian military ingenuity, was relegated to history, replaced by new technologies and strategies that better suited the new landscape of warfare. Nevertheless, its history remains a fascinating example of how a nation adapted its tactics and technologies to meet the unique challenges of its time. While the imposing wooden walls and sturdy wagon forts of Guliai-Gorod have disappeared from modern battlefields, its legacy endures as an eloquent testament to the human capacity for innovation in the face of complex challenges. The story of Guliai-Gorod goes beyond the mere description of a military tactic. It offers us a window into the specific needs, geographic limitations, and strategic ingenuity of Tsarist Russia at a crucial period in its formation. In a world where military doctrines seem to be converging on the pike and shot model, Russia forged its own path, developing a solution that not only suited its unique environment, but also proved effective against a variety of adversaries. Guliai-Gorod reminds us that military history is full of creative solutions and contextual adaptations, where necessity, indeed, becomes the mother of invention. Its existence and success demonstrate that there is no single right way in the art of war, and that understanding the particularities of a theater of operations and the characteristics of the enemy can lead to the development of surprisingly original military strategies and technologies. Thus, Guliai-Gorod remains not just a curious footnote in military history, but an inspiring example of how human intelligence can shape the course of conflict, leaving an indelible mark on the development of tactics and on the very history of a nation.